He walked quietly across the breakroom floor, head bowed, pushing the janitor's cart like a shadow gliding through fluorescent light. In a building where fortunes were made with a signature and power was measured in floors, there was a man nobody saw. A man invisible in a world built of glass and gold. Edward Haynes. 36 years old. Single father. Night janitor. And yet, he was the one who did the impossible. Because Jody Robinson, the billionaire's daughter, the woman the media called the unmanageable heiress, was untouchable. Once, she'd been the golden child of Robinson Enterprises, brilliant and full of fire, her future as bright as the empire her family had built. Now there was only rage. 18 therapists had walked away. Security guards requested transfers. Every advisor hired to manage her lasted less than a month. She screamed when cornered, destroyed when pushed, and locked her heart behind walls no amount of money could break. Until one seemingly ordinary evening, Edward was cleaning near the elevators when the doors slid open with a chime. He heard the sharp echo of heels against marble. Then he saw her, Jody Robinson, fury wrapped in a golden suit, eyes blazing like defiance itself. Someone had leaked her charity proposal. Millions lost. Her father's contempt still burning in her head. You'll never be enough. She was seconds from unleashing the storm inside her. Then she stopped. Because sitting at a small corner table in the break room, his young daughter asleep in his arms, was the janitor she'd never noticed before. Her hand froze mid-gesture. The shouting died on her lips. The girl stirred, murmured something soft, nestled closer into Edward's chest. And for one fragile, impossible heartbeat, the entire world fell silent. No one in the company knew what had just happened. No one knew that the man pushing the cleaning cart had once held a family together with nothing but love and determination, until he lost everything. No one knew he understood her pain better than anyone ever could. And Charles Robinson, the most powerful man in the city, was about to witness something that would shatter his empire from within. If you believe that quiet strength can change even the coldest hearts, hit subscribe, because this story will prove that the most invisible people can do the most extraordinary things. Tell me, can a man who's lost everything really save a woman who's losing herself? On the 52nd floor of Robinson Enterprises, in the heart of Manhattan where steel and ambition pierced the clouds, the glass walls reflected the glow of a city that never slept. In a silence so deep she could hear her own heartbeat, Jody Robinson stood motionless in her father's executive suite, eyes fixed on the laptop screen before her. On it was the 9th resignation letter in 6 months. Ms. Robinson's emotional volatility poses a risk to client relations and internal morale. I regret that I can no longer serve in an advisory capacity. Effective immediately. Jody slowly closed the laptop. Not again. At 29, the daughter of Charles Robinson, CEO of a $4.7 billion global conglomerate, a man who controlled industries and commanded governments, was supposed to be the future of the empire. She had degrees from Columbia and Oxford. She spoke 4 languages. She'd once pitched a charity initiative that made headlines worldwide. Now she made headlines for all the wrong reasons. Robinson heiress explodes at gala. Another advisor quits. Is Jody Robinson unmanageable? Billionaire's daughter, genius or liability? The truth? She was drowning, and no amount of money could pull her back to shore. 3 years earlier, Jody Robinson had been golden. She'd walked into boardrooms with her mother by her side, Victoria Robinson, the steady heart of the family, the one who taught Jody that power without compassion was just cruelty in expensive shoes. Don't let them make you cold, sweetheart, her mother had whispered once, brushing Jody's hair before a charity event. You have your father's mind, but keep my heart. Jody had smiled then. She'd believed she could have both. Then came the scandal. A corporate whistleblower. False accusations. Media frenzy. Victoria Robinson's name dragged through every tabloid, every news cycle, every vicious headline. The stress broke her. A heart attack at 51. Gone before Jody could say goodbye. And Charles Robinson never forgave his daughter for the chaos that preceded it. You cost me my wife, he'd said once, voice cold as marble. Don't cost me my company too. Now Jody stood alone in a corner office designed for success, surrounded by awards she no longer cared about and accolades that felt hollow. Outside the window, the city glittered like broken glass. She opened the private file on her desk, photos from before. Her mother's smile. Family vacations. A picture of Jody at 16, laughing, holding a trophy, her mother's arm around her shoulders. "You're going to do extraordinary things, Jody. I know it." Jody's hand trembled as she closed the folder. "I became extraordinary at destroying everything I touch." The first nanny, Margaret, patient, experienced, kind, had lasted 2 weeks. Jody didn't need a nanny. She needed a prison guard, her father had said. So he sent advisors. Then therapists. Then handlers. People paid to fix her, to make her palatable, manageable, profitable again. Every single one quit. And every time one left, her father's disappointment grew colder. The board meetings grew tenser. The whispers grew louder. "She's going to ruin us." Her phone buzzed. A text from her father's assistant. "Board meeting moved to 9 a.m. Your attendance is mandatory. Please be prepared to discuss your future role, or lack thereof." Jody stared at the message until the screen went dark. Then, for the first time in 3 years, she let herself cry. Not the angry tears. Not the furious, defiant sobs. Just the quiet, hopeless kind. The kind that whispered, "I don't know how to fix this." The city lights blurred through her tears, and Jody Robinson, brilliant, broken, and utterly alone, realized she was out of people to call. 4:47 a.m. Queens, New York. The alarm hadn't rung yet, but Edward Haynes was already awake. He'd learned long ago that sleep was a luxury grief didn't allow. 38 years old, but the lines around his eyes told a different story. Silver touched his temples. His hands, calloused and worn, moved quietly in the dark as he dressed in his blue janitor's uniform, Clean Corp solution stitched across the chest, frayed at the edges from too many washes. He walked into the next room, barely large enough for a twin bed and a small nightstand. Jennifer lay curled under a patchwork quilt, red gold hair spilling across the pillow, her breathing soft and steady. Edward knelt beside her bed and brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "Sleep well, sweetheart," he whispered. "Daddy's got you." On the wall above her bed, taped carefully, were drawings she'd made, stick figure families, hearts in crayon, a house with a garden. And in the corner one photo, faded, creased from being held too many times. A woman with kind eyes and a bright smile. Edward's wife. Jennifer's mother. Margaret Haynes. 1987 to 2019. Gone 4 years now. But her absence still filled every corner of their lives. 6 years earlier, their apartment had been full of laughter. "Daddy, look. I made you a crown." 3-year-old Jennifer stood on a chair, holding a lopsided paper crown covered in glitter and stickers. Edward knelt down, and she placed it on his head with the solemnity of a queen. "Perfect," he said, grinning. "Am I king of the living room now? King of everything." Jennifer giggled. Margaret stood in the doorway, arms crossed, smiling. "She's got you wrapped around her little finger." "Guilty as charged," Edward said, scooping Jennifer into his arms. Back then he'd been a mechanic, good with his hands, patient with engines, reliable. He worked at a small garage in Brooklyn, and though the pay wasn't much, it was enough. Enough for birthday cakes and new shoes. Enough for Margaret to work part-time as a hospice nurse. Enough for them to feel safe. Then Margaret got sick. It started with fatigue. Then the headaches. Then the diagnosis that shattered their world, stage 4 ovarian cancer. The treatments drained their savings. The hospital bills piled up. Edward sold the car. Sold the tools. Took night shifts, double shifts, anything to keep her alive. But cancer didn't care about love or effort. Margaret died on a Tuesday morning in April, holding Edward's hand, whispering, "Take care of our girl. Promise me." "I promise." Now, Edward sat on the subway in the pre-dawn darkness, his worn canvas bag on his lap. Inside, a cold lunch, an apple, and a small cloth pouch. He opened it carefully. Handmade toys. A tiny stuffed bunny with mismatched button eyes. A wooden car he'd carved himself, crooked but sturdy. A bracelet made of painted beads. Gifts for Jennifer. Small things. Things that said, "I'm still here. I'm still your dad." Because even though Edward Haynes cleaned floors for a living, even though he was invisible to the people who walked past him every night, even though grief lived in his chest like a stone, he was still a father. And that was the one thing no one could take from him. The subway doors opened. Edward stepped out into the cold morning air and walked toward Robinson Enterprises, where glass towers stretched toward a sky that never seemed to notice him. But tonight, that was going to change. By 9 a.m., the entire 52nd floor was buzzing. Did you hear? Jody Robinson actually spoke to the janitor. Not just spoke, she stood there for like 10 minutes. Just staring. I heard she was crying. No way. Jody Robinson doesn't cry. She destroys. The whispers slithered through cubicles, boardrooms, and break stations like poison wrapped in curiosity. By lunch, the story had morphed into something unrecognizable. Some said Jody had screamed at him. Others claimed she'd offered him money to keep quiet about something. One particularly vicious rumor suggested the janitor's child was somehow involved in a scandal. No one knew the truth. But everyone had an opinion. Jody heard the whispers before she even stepped off the elevator. She walked into the executive suite with her head high, golden blazer sharp as a blade, heels clicking like gunfire against marble. But inside, her chest was tight. Her hands trembled in her pockets. They're talking about me again. They're always talking about me. Her assistant, Monica, met her at the door with a tablet and a cautious expression. Ms. Robinson, your father wants to see you in conference room A, immediately. Jody's jaw tightened. Of course he does. Charles Robinson sat at the head of the long glass table, fingers steepled, expression carved from stone. Two board members flanked him, vultures in tailored suits. Sit, he said without looking up. Jody sat. Explain to me, Charles began, voice low and dangerous, why my daughter was seen having a breakdown in front of the night cleaning staff. I didn't have a breakdown. Then what would you call standing in the break room at midnight, staring at a janitor like some kind of, he stopped himself. Exhaled sharply. This company cannot afford another scandal, Jody. Not after the charity debacle. Not after the gala incident. And certainly not after the media circus your emotions created last quarter. Jody's nails dug into her palms. I was tired. I stopped for coffee. That's it. Coffee. Charles leaned back, eyes cold. You're a liability, Jody. And liabilities get cut. The words landed like a slap. One of the board members cleared his throat. Perhaps Ms. Robinson would benefit from a leave of absence. For her health. They want me gone. Jody stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. I don't need a leave of absence. I need you to stop treating me like I'm broken. Then stop acting broken, Charles said flatly. Jody left before the tears could come. That night, she returned to the office late, long after the executives had gone home, long after the lights dimmed and the building exhaled into silence. She told herself she came back to work. But that was a lie. She found herself walking toward the break room. Slowly. Reluctantly. Like her feet knew something her mind refused to admit. And there he was. Edward Haynes, pushing his cart down the hallway, headphones in, moving with the kind of quiet purpose that made him nearly invisible. He didn't see her. Didn't even glance up. Jody stepped back into the shadows and watched. He worked methodically, wiping down surfaces, emptying trash bins, straightening chairs. No wasted movement. No complaint. Just steady. Calm. Present. Then she heard it. A soft giggle. Jody's breath caught. Down the hall, in the small employee lounge, Jennifer sat cross-legged on the floor, coloring in a battered notebook. She hummed to herself, swinging her legs, completely absorbed in her own little world. Edward glanced over, smiled, just a small tired smile, and whispered, 5 more minutes, sweetheart. Jennifer looked up, grinned, and went back to her drawing. Jody's chest ached. When was the last time someone looked at me like that? Not with fear. Not with frustration. Not with the exhausted patience of someone paid to tolerate her. Just love. Edward didn't know he was being watched. He never did. As he mopped the floor near the vending machines, his mind drifted, back to the garage in Brooklyn, back to the small kitchen where Margaret used to hum while cooking, back to the hospital room where he'd held her hand and felt her slip away. "Promise me you'll keep going," she'd whispered, voice barely audible. "Promise me you won't let grief turn you into someone I wouldn't recognize." "I promise." But keeping that promise was harder than he'd ever imagined. The medical bills had crushed him. The funeral costs buried him. He'd sold everything: tools, furniture, his wedding ring. He'd taken any job he could find. Security guard, dishwasher. Finally, janitorial work, night shifts, so Jennifer could stay with a neighbor during the day. He was 38 and felt 60. But every morning, when Jennifer wrapped her arms around his neck and said, "I love you, Daddy," he found the strength to do it all over again. Because she was all he had left. And he would not fail her. Jody stepped back into the elevator, heart pounding. She didn't understand why she felt this way. Why the sight of a janitor and his daughter unsettled her so deeply. Why their quiet, ordinary love felt like something she'd lost and could never get back. Back in her penthouse apartment, glass walls, designer furniture, silence so thick it suffocated, Jody stood by the window and stared at the city below. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. "Board meeting tomorrow. 8 a.m. Don't be late. And don't embarrass me." She hurled the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall. Jody sank to the floor, back against the cold glass, and let the sobs come, ugly, gasping, desperate. The kind of crying that had no witnesses, no headlines, no performance. Just grief. For her mother. For herself. For the version of Jody Robinson who used to believe she could change the world. "You're going to do extraordinary things," her mother had said. But all Jody had done was break. And break. And break again. The next morning, Edward found something strange. Taped to his locker in the staff room was a folded piece of paper. He opened it carefully. Inside, in elegant handwriting, "Keep your distance. For both our sakes. J.R." Edward stared at the note for a long moment. Then he folded it, slipped it into his pocket, and went back to work. But something had shifted. Two broken people had collided in the dark. And neither of them knew yet that this was only the beginning. Speech balloon, what do you think Jody really meant by that note? Was it a warning, or a plea? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and hit subscribe so you don't miss what happened next, where everything between them starts to unravel, in the most unexpected way. For 3 days, Edward followed the note's instructions. He avoided the 52nd floor, took different hallways, cleaned the executive suites only when he knew Jody Robinson wouldn't be there. He told himself it was easier this way, safer for both of them. The whispers had already started. The last thing he needed was to lose this job. But on the 4th night, everything changed. The storm hit Manhattan like a fist. Rain hammered the glass walls of Robinson Enterprises, lightning splitting the sky in jagged white fractures. The building groaned under the wind, and the lights flickered, once, twice, before the backup generators kicked in. Edward was on the 50th floor when he heard it. A crash. Sharp and violent, followed by the unmistakable sound of glass shattering. He froze, mop in hand, listening. Another crash. It came from above. From the executive level. No one should be up there this late. Edward hesitated. The note was still folded in his pocket. "Keep your distance." But something, instinct, concern, the faint memory of Margaret's voice saying don't ignore people in pain, pulled him toward the stairwell. The 52nd floor was dark except for a single light bleeding from Charles Robinson's corner office. Edward approached slowly, footsteps silent on the plush carpet. Through the half-open door, he saw her. Jody Robinson stood in front of a shattered mirror, shards of glass scattered at her feet like fallen stars. Her hair was loose, cascading over her shoulders. Her golden blazer was gone, replaced by a wrinkled blouse. Mascara streaked her cheeks. She stared at her fractured reflection, chest heaving, fists clenched. "I hate you," she whispered to the broken image. "I hate what you've become." Then she picked up a crystal paperweight from the desk, and Edward moved. "Don't." His voice was quiet, but it cut through the storm like a bell. Jody spun around, eyes wild. "What are you? Get out. Get out." Edward didn't move. He just stood there, rain drumming against the windows behind him, his uniform damp from the walk-up. "You're bleeding," he said softly. Jody looked down. Blood dripped from her palm where she'd gripped a shard of glass without realizing it. She stared at it, confused, as if the pain belonged to someone else. Edward stepped forward carefully, the way someone might approach a wounded animal. From his pocket, he pulled out a faded blue handkerchief, clean, but worn soft from years of use. He held it out. Jody looked at the handkerchief, then at him, then back at the cloth. Slowly, trembling, she took it. Edward watched as she pressed it against her bleeding palm, watched the tears spill over again, quieter this time, like a dam finally giving way. He didn't tell her it would be okay. Didn't offer empty reassurances. Didn't try to fix her. He just stood there, a silent presence in the storm, and let her break without judgment. After a long moment, Jody sank into her father's leather chair, shoulders shaking. "Why did you come up here?" she whispered. "I heard the glass. You should have ignored it." "I don't ignore people who need help." Jody laughed bitterly. "I don't need help. I need," her voice cracked. "I don't even know anymore." Edward glanced at the shattered mirror, then back at her. "Sometimes we break things because we're trying to break free." The words hung in the air. Jody stared at him, something shifting behind her eyes. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. "Who are you?" she asked, not unkindly. "Just the janitor." "No." She shook her head slowly. "You're not." The silence between them stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was something else. Something neither of them had felt in a long time. Safety. Edward left without another word, but the handkerchief stayed behind, blood-stained and folded carefully on the edge of the desk. And the next morning, when he opened his locker, he found it washed, pressed, and returned with a single word written on a sticky note. "Thank you." 3 days later, Jody found the first gift. She arrived at her office early, coffee in hand, bracing herself for another round of boardroom politics. But when she set her briefcase down, she noticed something on her desk. A paper heart. Crudely cut, colored with red crayon, edges uneven. On the back, in wobbly handwriting. "For the pretty lady. From Jennifer." Jody's breath caught. She picked it up slowly, as if it might disappear. Turned it over. Traced the crooked lines with her finger. When was the last time someone gave her something without wanting anything in return? She didn't know. But she kept the heart. 2 days later, another gift appeared. A drawing this time, stick figures in bright colors. A little girl with orange hair. A tall man with kind eyes. And between them, carefully colored in gold, a woman with long hair and a smile. Underneath, in that same wobbly handwriting, "You looked sad. Don't be sad." Jody stared at the drawing for a full minute. Then, against every instinct she'd built over years of armor and ice, she smiled. A real smile. Small, fragile, but undeniably real. The gifts kept coming. A bracelet made of painted beads. A folded paper crane. A rock with googly eyes glued on and the word friend written in marker. Jody kept every single one. She started arriving at the office earlier, hoping to catch a glimpse of the little girl who saw her, not as a liability, not as a scandal, but as someone worth comforting. And one night, she finally did. Jennifer sat cross-legged outside Jody's office, carefully coloring another drawing. Edward stood nearby, organizing his cleaning cart, glancing over every few seconds to make sure she was safe. Jody approached slowly, heart pounding. Jennifer looked up, eyes bright. "Hi." Jody froze. "Hi. Do you like the presents?" Jody's throat tightened. Yes. I love them." Jennifer beamed. "Good. You seemed like you needed them." "I did." Jody crouched down, eye level with the child. "Thank you, Jennifer. You know my name. Your dad told me." Jody glanced up at Edward, who stood a few feet away, watching carefully but not interfering. Jennifer tilted her head, studying Jody with the unfiltered honesty only children possess. "Are you still sad?" Jody blinked back tears. "A little. But less than before." "That's good." Jennifer held up her drawing, a garden full of flowers. "This is for you. So you can remember that pretty things still grow." Jody took the drawing with trembling hands. And for the first time in 3 years, she felt something other than anger or emptiness. She felt hope. But hope, in the world of Robinson Enterprises, was a dangerous thing. The boardroom was a battlefield. 6 executives sat around the table, each one a shark dressed in designer wool. At the head, Charles Robinson presided like a king judging his court. "Gentlemen," he began, voice sharp, "we have a problem." Slides appeared on the screen behind him, headlines, social media posts, blurry photos of Jody leaving the building late at night. Robinson heiress unraveling. Investors worried about leadership instability. Is Jody Robinson fit to lead? Charles's jaw tightened. "My daughter's condition is affecting our reputation. The Singapore deal is stalling. Our stock dropped 2% last week. Investors are asking questions I shouldn't have to answer." One executive leaned forward. "With all due respect, Charles, perhaps it's time to consider a more permanent solution." "Meaning?" "Remove her from the public-facing side of the business. Quietly. Gradually. Before she costs us more than we can recover." Charles was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. That night, Charles summoned Jody to his office. She entered with her shoulders squared, ready for another battle. But what she got was worse than anger. Disappointment. "Sit." She sat. Charles didn't look at her. Just stared out the window at the glittering city below. "You are my biggest liability, Jody." The words were a blade, precise and cold. "I've given you chances. Opportunities. Second, third, fourth chances. And every single time, you've proven that you're not ready. Father. Don't." He finally turned to face her, eyes empty. "The board wants you removed. And frankly, I'm running out of reasons to disagree." Jody's world tilted. "I'm trying." "You're failing." Charles leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. "Whatever you think you're doing, these late nights, this distraction, it ends now. Do you understand me? You embarrass me again, and you're done." Jody stood, legs shaking. "I'm not a child." "Then stop acting like one." She left before the tears could give him the satisfaction. That night, Jody found Edward in the break room, sitting quietly with Jennifer asleep in his arms. She didn't say anything. Just stood in the doorway, watching the gentle rise and fall of the child's breathing, the careful way Edward adjusted the blanket around her shoulders. He looked up, met her eyes. And in that moment, no words were needed. The silence between them said everything. "I see you. And you're not alone." Do you think Jody's father will ever understand what she truly needs? Or is he too far gone? Drop your thoughts below. It happened on a Tuesday morning, in the marble lobby where 1,000 people passed through without ever truly seeing each other. Jennifer had dropped her backpack. Crayons scattered across the polished floor, red, blue, yellow, green, rolling in every direction like tiny escaped prisoners. She scrambled after them, her small hands trying to gather them all before her father noticed, before anyone noticed, because being noticed meant being in the way. Edward was 10 feet away, finishing up near the security desk, when he saw her panic. He started toward her. But someone else got there first. Jody Robinson, in a charcoal gray suit and heels that cost more than Edward's monthly rent, crouched down beside the little girl and began collecting crayons. "I've got the blue ones," Jody said softly. Jennifer looked up, eyes wide. "You don't have to." "I want to." Jody smiled, genuinely smiled, and handed over a fistful of crayons. "Besides, I like blue. It's a good color. It's my favorite too." Jennifer grinned, and suddenly the two of them were laughing, sorting crayons by color, completely oblivious to the rush of executives streaming past. Edward watched from a distance, something warm and fragile blooming in his chest. "She's laughing. When was the last time Jennifer laughed like that with anyone but me?" And Jody looked lighter, younger, like the weight she carried everywhere had been set down, just for a moment. Neither of them saw the man with the camera phone. Marcus Chun, freelance journalist, always in the right place at the right time. He'd been staking out Robinson Enterprises for weeks, hoping for a headline. "Scandal sold." And the Robinsons? They were clickbait gold. He raised his phone. Click. The photo was perfect. Jody Robinson, billionaire heiress, crouched on the marble floor beside a little girl in second-hand clothes. Both of them laughing. Jody's hand resting gently on Jennifer's shoulder. A moment of unguarded humanity in a building that usually had none. Marcus smiled. "This is going to blow up." By noon, the photo was everywhere. Twitter, billionaire's daughter comforted by janitor's child. The photo everyone's talking about. Thread. Instagram, when privilege meets reality. Jody Robinson in rare moment of humanity with cleaning staff's daughter. Hashtag heartwarming or hashtag performative. TikTok, viral video montage of the photo set to emotional music. 4.2 million views in 3 hours. The headlines came fast and vicious. Heiress finds new obsession? Jody Robinson's latest PR stunt? Is the Robinson empire using a child for damage control? Billionaire's daughter caught slumming with staff. What's really going on? Comments poured in by the thousands. She's finally showing her human side. This is so fake. Probably staged. Who's the kid? Someone investigate. That's the janitor's daughter. People say he's a single dad. Plot twist. She's trying to adopt her way into good PR. The internet did what it always did. It took a moment of genuine connection and dissected it until nothing pure remained. Charles Robinson saw the photo at 1:47 p.m. He was in the middle of a conference call with Singapore investors when his assistant knocked. 3 sharp raps, the code for emergency. He muted the call. What? She slid a tablet across his desk without a word. Charles stared at the screen. At his daughter. At the child. At the 1,000 comments speculating, judging, destroying. His face turned to stone. He unmuted the call. "Gentlemen, something urgent has come up. We'll reconvene tomorrow." He ended the call. Then he pressed the intercom. "Get me the head of security. And find out who the hell that janitor is." Edward was cleaning the 18th floor when security found him. "Mr. Haynes." The guard's voice was clipped, professional. "Mr. Robinson wants to see you. Now." Edward's stomach dropped. "Is Jennifer okay? Did something?" "Just come with me." They rode the elevator in silence. Edward's mind raced. What did I do? Did I miss something? Is this about Jody? The doors opened on the 52nd floor. Charles Robinson's office was all glass and steel, cold, vast, designed to make you feel small. And it worked. Charles stood with his back to the door, hands clasped behind him, staring out at the city like a king surveying his kingdom. "Mr. Haynes," he said without turning, "do you know why you're here?" Edward's throat was dry. "No, sir." Charles turned slowly. His eyes were ice. "This." He held up his phone. The photo. Jody and Jennifer, laughing. Edward's breath caught. "Sir, that was, she was just helping." "I don't care what it was." Charles stepped closer, and Edward instinctively took a step back. "Do you have any idea what you've done? My daughter is on every social media platform, every gossip site, He stopped, jaw clenched. Do you understand the position you've put this company in? I didn't. You didn't what? Think? Of course you didn't. Charles's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. Let me make something very clear to you, Mr. Haynes. You work for me. You mop my floors. You exist in my building because I allow it. And your place, your only place, is invisible. Edward's hands curled into fists at his sides. My daughter was dropping her things. Ms. Robinson helped her. That's it. That's it. Charles laughed, sharp and humorless. You think this is about kindness? This is about optics. About control. About making sure my daughter stops embarrassing this family. She wasn't. Enough. Charles turned away, dismissive. You're suspended. Effective immediately. 2 weeks, no pay. And if I ever see you or your child near my daughter again, you're done. Not just here. Everywhere. I will make sure you never work in this city again. The words hit like a physical blow. Edward stood frozen, heart pounding. I have a daughter to feed. Then you should have thought about that before becoming part of a scandal. This isn't a scandal. It's a little girl helping another little girl. Charles turned back, eyes blazing. Get out. Edward left the office, legs shaking, mind reeling. 2 weeks without pay. Rent was due in 5 days. Jennifer's medication cost $200 a week. How am I going to? Edward. He turned. Jody was running down the hallway, heels clicking, hair flying behind her. She skidded to a stop in front of him, breathless. What did he say to you? Edward looked away. It doesn't matter. Tell me. I'm suspended. 2 weeks. Jody's face went white, then red. Then something dangerous flickered in her eyes. He what? Ms. Robinson. Don't. She held up a hand. Don't tell me to let it go. Don't tell me it's fine. Her voice shook, not with sadness, but with rage. This is my fault. That photo, the media, it's all because of me. You were just being kind. And he's punishing you for it. Jody's jaw set. No, not this time. What are you? But she was already gone, storming toward the boardroom where Charles was meeting with the executive team. Edward's heart dropped. Jody, wait. The boardroom doors slammed open. 6 executives looked up, startled. Charles Robinson, mid-sentence, stopped. Jody, this is a private. Reinstate him. Silence. Charles's expression darkened. Excuse me. Jody stepped into the room, every inch of her vibrating with fury. Edward Haynes. The janitor you just suspended for the crime of being decent. Reinstate him. Now. This is not the time. This is exactly the time. Jody's voice cut through the room like glass. You suspended a single father because I helped his daughter pick up crayons. You punished him because the media took a moment of kindness and turned it into a headline. And you did it to protect what, exactly? Your image? Your control. One of the executives cleared his throat. Ms. Robinson, perhaps we should discuss this privately. No. Jody turned to face them all. You want to talk about liability? About instability? I'm standing right here. Punish me. But don't you dare punish a man who's done nothing wrong. Charles stood slowly, his voice deadly calm. You're making a scene. Good. Jody's eyes blazed. Maybe it's time someone did. Leave. Now. Reinstate him, or I walk out of this building and I never come back. The room went silent. Charles stared at his daughter, and for a moment, something flickered in his eyes, surprise maybe. Or fear. Then it was gone. Security, he said quietly. Escort my daughter out. By 5 p.m., the story had exploded again. Jody Robinson storms boardroom, defends janitor in shocking confrontation. Robinson Enterprises in chaos after heiress threatens to quit. Father versus daughter, the battle for Robinson's soul. The internet went wild. Stock prices dipped. Investors panicked. And somewhere in Queens, Edward Haynes sat in his small apartment, holding Jennifer close, wondering how a single act of kindness could destroy everything. Was Jody right to confront her father publicly, or did she just make everything worse? And what do you think Edward should do now? Comment below. For 48 hours, the internet burned. Then, suddenly, silence. Jody Robinson disappeared. No statements. No sightings. No carefully crafted PR responses. Just gone. Her penthouse was dark. Her office, empty. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Security confirmed she'd left the building at 6:47 p.m. on Tuesday and hadn't returned. By Thursday morning, the media frenzy reached fever pitch. Where is Jody Robinson? Heiress vanishes after explosive boardroom confrontation. Family sources fear the worst. The tabloids, always hungry, began to speculate. Nervous breakdown. Rehab. Suicide watch. Twitter exploded with theories. Reddit threads dissected every detail. TikTok videos analyzed her body language in the viral photo, looking for warning signs. Charles Robinson released a terse statement through his PR team. Ms. Robinson is taking time for personal reflection. We ask for privacy during this period. But the carefully chosen words only fueled the fire. Personal reflection was code for crisis. And everyone knew it. Edward saw the headlines on his phone at 3 a.m. Unable to sleep, Jennifer curled up beside him. Jody Robinson missing. Father refuses to comment. His chest tightened. She's not missing. She's hiding. He didn't know how he knew. He just did. For 2 days, he tried to push the feeling aside. Tried to focus on finding another job, on stretching the last $400 in his account, on keeping Jennifer fed and safe. But the worry gnawed at him. Why did you come here? She'd asked that night in her father's office, when he'd found her surrounded by broken glass. Because you looked like someone who needed to be found. And now she was lost again. On Friday night, Edward made a decision. He dropped Jennifer off with Mrs. Chun, the neighbor who sometimes watched her, and took the subway to the last place anyone would think to look. He remembered it from a conversation, barely a whisper really, weeks ago, when Jody had been staring at one of Jennifer's drawings. My mother used to paint, she'd said softly. She had a studio in Red Hook. After she died, my father locked it up. Said it was too painful to keep. But he never sold it. Just left it there like a tomb. Edward had memorized the address without meaning to. Now, as the subway rattled through the darkness, he prayed he was right. Red Hook was quieter than Manhattan. Warehouses and old brick buildings, the kind of neighborhood that used to be industrial and was slowly being swallowed by gentrification. The studio was on the 3rd floor of a converted factory, tucked between a yoga studio and a coffee roaster that had closed for the night. Edward climbed the narrow staircase, heart pounding. The door was unlocked. He pushed it open slowly. The space was dim, lit only by the glow of the city filtering through tall, dusty windows. Canvases leaned against the walls, some finished, most not. Paint-stained tarps covered the floor. The air smelled of turpentine and thyme. And there, in the center of it all, sat Jody Robinson. Barefoot. Hair tangled. Still wearing the same clothes from Tuesday. Surrounded by shattered glass and half-finished paintings, her knees pulled to her chest, staring at nothing. She looked up when he entered, eyes hollow. How did you find me? Edward closed the door behind him. You told me about this place once. I barely remember telling you. I remembered. Jody laughed, bitter, broken. Of course you did. She looked away. You should go. I'm not good company right now. Edward didn't leave. He walked further into the studio, stepping carefully around the glass, and sat down on the floor a few feet away from her. Not too close. Just present. Why did you come here? Jody whispered. Edward met her gaze, steady and calm. Because you looked like someone who needed to be found. The words hung in the air between them. Jody's face crumpled. I don't know how to do this anymore, Edward. I don't know how to be the person everyone expects me to be. I don't even know who that person is. Then don't be her. It's not that simple. Isn't it? Edward glanced around the studio, at the paintings, at the memories frozen in brushstrokes. Your mother painted because it made her happy, didn't she? Not because it made money. Not because it fit someone's idea of who she should be. Jody's voice cracked. My father hated it. Said it was a waste of time. That she should focus on the company, on being the perfect wife, She stopped, tears streaming down her face. And when she died, he locked this place up like it never existed. Like she never existed. Edward said nothing. Just listened. I used to come here, Jody continued, voice barely above a whisper. When I was younger. Before everything fell apart. She'd let me sit in the corner and watch her paint. She'd say, Jody, sweetheart, the world will try to tell you who to be. But in here you get to decide. She sounds like she loved you very much. She did. Jody wiped her eyes. And I failed her. I became exactly what my father wanted. Cold, ambitious, ruthless. And when the world punished me for it, he threw me away like I was worthless. You're not worthless. Jody looked at him, really looked at him. How do you do that? Do what? Stay kind. After everything you've lost. After everything the world's taken from you. Her voice broke. You lost your wife. You're raising a daughter alone. You were suspended because of me. And you're still here, sitting on a dirty floor in an abandoned studio, trying to make me feel better. Edward was quiet for a moment. Then softly, because being angry at the world didn't bring Margaret back. It didn't make Jennifer's life easier. It just made me feel more alone. He looked at Jody, eyes kind but unflinching. You're not alone, Jody. You just think you have to be. Something in her chest broke open. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed, deep, ugly, gasping sobs that she'd been holding back for years. All the rage, the grief, the shame, the exhaustion poured out of her like a flood. And Edward stayed. He didn't try to fix her. Didn't offer platitudes. Just sat there, quiet and steady, while she fell apart. When the tears finally slowed, Jody looked up, eyes red and swollen. I don't know how to go back. Then don't. Not yet. My father can wait. Edward's voice was firm. You need to breathe first. To figure out what you want. Not what he wants. Not what the media wants. You. Jody stared at him, something shifting behind her eyes. Why do you care? Because someone cared about me once. When I didn't think I deserved it. Edward stood, held out his hand. Come on. Let's get you some food. When's the last time you ate? Jody hesitated. Then slowly, she took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. I don't know. Then we start there. They left the studio together as the sun began to rise over the city, two broken people who'd found each other in the rubble. And for the first time in days, Jody Robinson didn't feel like she was drowning. Meanwhile, across the city, Charles Robinson sat in his office, staring at his phone. 43 missed calls. 27 voicemails. All from people demanding to know where his daughter was. He told them she was fine. But the truth was, he had no idea. And for the first time in his carefully controlled life, Charles Robinson felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Fear. Do you think Jody should go back to her father's empire, or is it time to walk away for good? And what will happen when the world finds out where she's been? Drop your thoughts below. The call came at 6:23 a.m. on Monday. Edward's phone buzzed on the nightstand, jolting him awake. Unknown number. He answered, groggy. Hello. Mr. Haynes. A woman's voice, professional, cautious. This is Diana Moss, Mr. Robinson's executive assistant. I'm calling to inform you that your suspension has been reconsidered. You're cleared to return to work tonight. Full back pay will be processed by end of week. Edward sat up, fully awake now. I don't understand, Mr. Robinson said. Mr. Robinson is unaware of this call. Her voice dropped slightly. Let's just say certain parties believe the suspension was unjust. Your record will be cleared. No questions asked. The line went dead. Edward stared at the phone, heart pounding. Jody. It had to be her. But how? And why secretly? He returned to Robinson Enterprises that night, pushing his cart through familiar hallways that suddenly felt different. Employees who'd never looked at him twice now whispered when he passed. That's him. The janitor from the photo. I heard he's got some kind of hold over her. Blackmail, probably. Or worse. Edward kept his head down, but the words cut deeper than he wanted to admit. By Wednesday, the tabloids had new ammunition. Janitor returns to Robinson Enterprises. What's really going on? Sources say Edward Haynes may be blackmailing heiress. Is Jody Robinson being manipulated? The narrative's twisted, uglier with each iteration. He's using his daughter to get close to her. Single dad sees opportunity, plays the sympathy card. Jody Robinson's judgment compromised. Insiders fear financial exploitation. Edward tried to ignore it. Tried to focus on work, on Jennifer, on simply surviving. But the poison seeped in anyway. Then, on Friday morning, everything shattered. Jennifer woke up crying, clutching her stomach. Her skin was pale, clammy. She could barely stand. Edward's blood turned to ice. Not again. The hospital ER was chaos. Bright lights, beeping machines, doctors asking questions Edward could barely process. When did the symptoms start? Has she been exposed to anyone sick? Is she on any medications? They ran tests, drew blood, hooked her up to N4 while Edward sat beside her bed, holding her small hand, whispering prayers he wasn't sure anyone was listening to. The doctor returned hours later, expression grave. Mr. Haynes, your daughter has a severe infection. Her immune system is compromised, likely related to her previous medical history. We need to admit her. Start aggressive treatment immediately. Edward's throat tightened. How much? The doctor hesitated. With your insurance, you're looking at significant out-of-pocket costs. Several thousand, at minimum. Edward closed his eyes. I don't have several thousand. Do what you need to do, he said quietly. Just help her. He called in sick to work. Spent 3 days at the hospital, sleeping in a chair beside Jennifer's bed, eating vending machine food, watching her fight. On the 4th day, a nurse approached with a clipboard and a strange expression. Mr. Haynes? There's been an adjustment to your bill. Edward looked up, exhausted. What do you mean? Your daughter's treatment has been covered, in full, by an anonymous donor. The world tilted. What? Someone paid the entire balance. Nearly $18,000. I can't tell you who, hospital policy, but whoever it was made sure you wouldn't owe anything. Edward stared at her, mind reeling. No, she wouldn't. Would she? The story leaked within 48 hours. Breaking, Jody Robinson secretly pays for Janitor's daughter's medical bills. Hush money or genuine kindness. The internet debates Robinson heiress's $18,000 payment. Billionaire's daughter accused of buying silence. What is she hiding? The comments were vicious. She's trying to control him. This is textbook manipulation. She thinks money fixes everything. Poor guy probably feels trapped now. Edward read the headlines on his phone in the hospital cafeteria, hands shaking. Rage, confusion, betrayal, it all crashed over him at once. She had no right. He found Jody 2 days later, back at the studio in Red Hook. She was standing in front of one of her mother's unfinished paintings, arms wrapped around herself, when he walked in. She turned, saw his face, and her expression crumbled. "Edward." "Why?" His voice was quiet, but the anger underneath was molten. "Why did you do it?" Jody's eyes filled with tears. "I had to. Had to." Edward stepped closer, trembling. "You had no right. No right to step into my life like that, to make decisions for me, for my daughter. She was dying, Edward. And that was my burden to carry." His voice cracked. "I don't need your pity. I don't need you swooping in like some. It wasn't pity." Jody's voice broke, raw and desperate. "It was never pity." "Then what was it? Guilt? Some twisted sense of obligation because you got me suspended?" "It was gratitude." The words ripped out of her, loud and ragged. "You saved my life, Edward. That night in my father's office, in the studio, you didn't fix me, you didn't judge me, you just stayed. When everyone else walked away, you stayed." Tears streamed down her face. "Jennifer was dying, and you were breaking, and I couldn't," her voice shattered. "I couldn't just stand by and watch the one person who showed me kindness lose the thing he loved most." Edward stood frozen, the anger draining out of him, replaced by something else, something that hurt even more. "You should have told me," he whispered. "You would have said no." "Yes. I would have." "Exactly." Jody wiped her eyes, voice softening. "You would have let yourself drown before accepting help. Because that's who you are. And she took a shuddering breath. "I just wanted to save someone who mattered. Someone who mattered to you." The silence between them was deafening. Edward looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the truth written in every line of her face. She wasn't trying to control him. She wasn't playing games. She was just terrified of losing the one connection that made her feel human. "The media's calling it hush money," Edward said quietly. "I know. They're saying you're manipulating me. I know. They're saying I'm using you. I know." Jody's voice was barely a whisper. "And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what else to do." Edward exhaled slowly, running a hand over his face. "Jennifer's stable now. She's going to be okay." Jody's knees nearly buckled with relief. "Thank God. But we need to talk. About this. About everything." "I know." Edward looked at her, this broken, brilliant woman who'd paid a fortune to save his daughter and expected nothing in return, and felt something shift in his chest. "Thank you," he said softly, "for helping her. Even if you did it the wrong way." Jody laughed through her tears, a small, fragile sound. "I'm not very good at doing things the right way. I've noticed." They stood in the dusty studio, two people drowning in different oceans, trying to figure out how to swim. And somewhere across the city, the storm was only getting started. Was Jody wrong to pay for Jennifer's treatment without telling Edward? Or was it the only thing she could do? And can trust be rebuilt after something like this? Drop your thoughts below. The summons arrived via email at 11:47 p.m. on Sunday. TO, all senior staff, department heads, key stakeholders from Charles Robinson, COR, mandatory emergency meeting, Monday 9 a.m. sharp. Attendance is non-negotiable. Media will be present. Prepare accordingly. Edward saw it on the company portal when he clocked in for his shift. His stomach dropped. Media will be present. This wasn't a meeting. It was an execution. By 8:45 a.m., the lobby of Robinson Enterprises was swarming. Camera crews. Reporters. Investors in expensive suits, faces tight with concern. Employees whispered nervously, herded toward the main conference hall like cattle. Edward stood near the back, still in his janitor's uniform, feeling like an imposter in a world that had never wanted him. Security had stopped him at the elevator. "Mr. Robinson requested your presence specifically, Mr. Haynes." Requested. The word was a lie. This was a command. The conference hall was massive, glass walls, tiered seating, a stage where Charles Robinson stood like a general preparing for war. Behind him, a screen displayed the company logo, polished and gleaming. Jody sat in the front row, spine straight, face carefully neutral. But Edward could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands were clasped too tightly in her lap. She hadn't known this was coming either. Charles stepped to the podium. The room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice." His voice was measured, controlled. "Recent events have forced me to address some uncomfortable truths about this organization and my family." He paused, letting the weight settle. "Specifically, the inappropriate relationship between my daughter and a member of our custodial staff." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed. Edward's blood turned to ice. Charles continued, voice hardening. "My daughter, in a lapse of judgment I can only attribute to emotional instability, has made financial payments to this individual." He gestured toward Edward, and suddenly every eye in the room turned to him, totaling over $18,000. Money that was presented as charity, but raises serious questions about manipulation, exploitation, and... Stop. Jody's voice cut through the room like a blade. She stood slowly, turned to face her father. "That's enough." Charles's jaw tightened. "Sit down, Jody." "No." She stepped into the aisle, every eye on her now. "You don't get to do this. Not anymore. This is not the time. This is exactly the time." Jody's voice shook, but not with fear, with fury. "You dragged him here. You dragged me here. You turned our lives into a spectacle so you could control the narrative one more time. But I'm done letting you write my story." Murmurs erupted. Charles's face darkened. "You're making a scene." "Good." Jody laughed, bitter, sharp. "Let them see. Let them all see what you really are." She turned to the crowd, to the cameras, to the world watching. "My father wants you to believe that Edward Haynes is manipulating me, that he's using his daughter to exploit my wealth. But the truth..." Her voice cracked. "The truth is that Edward saved my life. Not with money. Not with power. With kindness." Charles slammed his hand on the podium. "Enough." "No." Jody whirled back to face him. "You want to talk about inappropriate relationships? Let's talk about how you've controlled every aspect of my life since the day Mom died. How you hired people to manage me like I was a PR problem instead of your daughter. How you've spent years telling me I'm not good enough, that I'm a liability." "Because you are." Charles's composure finally cracked, his voice rising. "Everything you touch falls apart. Every project, every partnership, every public appearance, chaos. Because you never let me breathe." Jody's tears fell freely now. "You suffocated me with expectations I could never meet. And when I failed, you threw me away like garbage." The room was dead silent. Charles stepped down from the stage, voice low and lethal. "I built this empire with blood and sacrifice. I will not let a janitor and a naive girl destroy it." Edward had heard enough. He stepped forward, voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. "Mr. Robinson, with all due respect, I never asked your daughter for anything. She helped my daughter because she chose to. Because unlike you, she remembers what it means to care about someone other than yourself." Charles turned on him, eyes blazing. "You think kindness can fix what blood built? You think your working-class morality means anything in a world you could never understand?" "No," Edward said quietly. "But it means something to your daughter. And maybe that's what you're really afraid of." The words landed like a bomb. Charles opened his mouth to respond. He's right. Everyone turned. Monica, Charles's assistant, stood near the back of the room, phone in hand, face pale. "Mr. Robinson, you need to see this." "Not now." "Now, sir." Her voice was urgent. She hurried forward, handed him the phone. Charles's face drained of color. On the screen was an email, sent from an anonymous address to every major media outlet 30 minutes ago. The subject line read, "Victoria Robinson's final letter to her husband." Charles's hands shook as he read. Then he looked up, And for the first time in years, Edward saw fear in the man's eyes. This is private. This was never meant. But it was too late. The letter was already being read aloud on news channels, shared across social media, projected onto screens in real time. Jody pulled out her own phone, voice breaking as she read her mother's words for the first time. "Charles, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. And I need you to hear what I couldn't say when I was alive. You've built something extraordinary. An empire. A legacy. But in building it, you've forgotten what matters most. Our daughter. The girl who used to run into your office with drawings and stories and hope in her eyes. You've turned her into a soldier in a war she never wanted to fight. Don't become what success made you. Be what your daughter still believes you can be, a father. Love her, Charles. Not as an asset. Not as a successor. As a human being who needs you to see her. Before it's too late." The silence that followed was suffocating. Charles stood frozen, the letter still displayed on his phone, the weight of his late wife's words crushing him. Jody's voice was barely a whisper. "You got this letter the day after she died. And you never told me." Charles couldn't look at her. "You read her final words, and you chose the empire over me anyway." A tear slid down Jody's cheek. "I loved you, Dad. I loved you so much. And you made me feel like that was never enough." Charles's voice cracked. "Jody." But she was already walking away, shoulders shaking, Edward falling into step beside her. The cameras captured it all. The empire's most powerful man, standing alone on a stage, surrounded by the ruins of everything he'd tried to control. And his daughter, walking away with the janitor everyone said wasn't good enough, because he was the only one who'd ever made her feel like she was. Outside, as they stepped into the cold morning air, Jody finally broke. Edward caught her as her knees buckled, holding her steady. "I've got you," he whispered. "I've got you." And for the first time in her life, Jody believed it. Did Charles Robinson deserve to be exposed like that? Or is there still hope for redemption? And what happens next? Can Jody and Edward survive what comes after this? Comment below, and subscribe because what happened next is where hearts break and miracles happen. The hospital scene that changes everything is coming. 3 days after the confrontation that shattered Robinson Enterprises, Jennifer's condition worsened. The call came at 2:34 a.m. "Mr. Haynes? This is Mount Sinai Hospital. Your daughter's fever has spiked to 104. We need you here immediately." Edward was dressed and out the door in under 2 minutes. The subway felt like it took hours. Every second stretched into eternity, his mind replaying worst-case scenarios he'd spent 4 years trying to forget. Not again. Please, not again. I can't lose her too. The pediatric ICU was a stark contrast to the chaos of the ER, quiet, dimly lit, machines beeping softly like mechanical heartbeats. Jennifer lay in the hospital bed, so small she barely made a dent in the white sheets. For lines snaked from her tiny arms. Her red-gold hair was matted with sweat. Her breathing was shallow, labored. Edward sank into the chair beside her bed and took her hand, so fragile, so impossibly small. "I'm here, sweetheart," he whispered. "Daddy's here." She didn't wake. The doctor, Dr. Patel, kind-eyed and exhausted, approached with a clipboard. "Mr. Haynes, we've started a new round of antibiotics. Her body is fighting hard, but the infection is aggressive. The next 48 hours are critical." Edward nodded, unable to speak. Critical. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Dr. Patel placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "She's strong. Kids are more resilient than we give them credit for." But Edward had heard those words before. 4 years ago, in a different hospital, with a different doctor, about his wife. "She's strong. She'll fight." Margaret had fought. And lost. Hours blurred together. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting machines. Edward stayed rooted in place, holding Jennifer's hand, whispering stories she couldn't hear. "Remember when we went to Coney Island last summer? You got cotton candy all over your face. You looked like a pink cloud. His voice cracked. You have to wake up, baby. You have to. I can't. He couldn't finish. The words lodged in his throat, sharp and suffocating. By 4 a.m., the exhaustion finally broke him. Edward buried his face in his hands and wept. Not the quiet, dignified tears he'd shed at Margaret's funeral. Not the controlled grief he'd learned to carry in silence so Jennifer wouldn't see. This was raw, guttural. The sound of a man who'd held everything together for so long that the weight had finally crushed him. I'm sorry, he sobbed into his hands. I'm so sorry, Margaret. I tried. I tried so hard. But I don't know if I can do this without you. I don't know if I'm strong enough. The machines beeped steadily. Jennifer slept on. And Edward shattered in the darkness, alone. He didn't hear the door open. Didn't hear the soft footsteps approaching. Didn't know he wasn't alone until a gentle hand touched his shoulder. He looked up, vision blurred by tears. Jody stood beside him, dressed in jeans and an oversized sweater, hair pulled back, face bare of makeup. She looked exhausted. Human. How did you? Monica told me. Jody's voice was soft. I hope it's okay that I came. Edward wiped his eyes quickly, embarrassed. You didn't have to. I know. She glanced at Jennifer, something tender crossing her face. But I wanted to. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jody pulled a second chair closer and sat down beside the bed. She didn't ask how he was. Didn't offer empty platitudes. Just sat quietly in the dim light, keeping vigil with him. Edward's voice was hoarse. She's all I have left. I know. If I lose her. You won't. Jody's voice was firm, almost fierce. She's going to fight. Because she has you. And that's more than most kids ever get. Edward looked at her, saw the conviction in her eyes, and felt something loosen in his chest. Thank you, he whispered, for being here. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. Around 5 a.m., Edward finally dozed off, slumped in the chair, hand still holding Jennifer's. Jody stayed awake. She watched the little girl breathe, watched her chest rise and fall, shallow but steady. Watched the way her small fingers curled around her father's palm, even in sleep. Something inside Jody ached. She'd never had this. This unconditional, uncomplicated love. Her father loved her the way corporations love assets, valuable when profitable, expendable when not. But this was different. Slowly, carefully, Jody reached out and brushed a strand of damp hair from Jennifer's forehead. The child stirred slightly but didn't wake. Jody's voice was barely a whisper, meant only for herself and the sleeping girl. You remind me what love feels like. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Not the kind people give because they want something. Not the kind that comes with conditions and expectations. Just love. Pure and simple. She wiped her eyes, smiling through the tears. Your dad is the luckiest man in the world, you know that? Because he has you. And you have him. And that's, her voice broke. That's everything. She didn't know Edward was awake. Didn't know he'd heard every word. Edward's eyes were open, tears streaming silently down his face, watching Jody speak to his daughter with a tenderness that broke him all over again, but in a different way. Not the breaking of grief. The breaking of walls. He realized in that moment that Jody Robinson had saved him too. Not with money. Not with grand gestures. But by reminding him that he wasn't alone. That grief didn't have to be a prison. That letting someone care about him, really care, wasn't weakness. It was survival. Margaret, if you're watching, I think you'd like her. As dawn broke through the hospital window, casting soft gold light across the room, something miraculous happened. Jennifer's eyes fluttered open. Daddy. Her voice was small, raspy, but there. Edward shot up, nearly knocking over his chair. Baby. I'm here. I'm right here. Jennifer blinked slowly, confused. Then her gaze shifted. Miss Jody. Jody laughed through her tears. "Hi, sweetheart. Why are you crying?" "Because I'm happy," Jody whispered. So happy." Jennifer smiled, weak but real. "Me too." Edward pressed his forehead against his daughter's hand, shoulders shaking with relief. "You scared me, baby girl." "I'm okay, Daddy. I'm okay." Dr. Patel appeared moments later, checking vitals, face breaking into a smile. "Her fever's down. 99.8. Whatever she's fighting, she's winning." Edward looked up at the ceiling, mouthing a silent thank you to whoever was listening. Jody stood, quietly backing toward the door to give them privacy. But Edward's voice stopped her. "Jody." She turned. "Thank you," he said, voice thick with emotion. "For everything. For staying. For—" he couldn't finish. Jody smiled, tears still glistening in her eyes. "You don't have to thank me, Edward. You gave me something I thought I'd lost forever." "What's that?" "Hope." Outside the hospital, the sun rose over Manhattan, bathing the city in light. And three broken people, a grieving father, a wounded heiress, and a little girl who'd survived the impossible, began to heal. Together. Did this moment change everything for Jody and Edward? And what do you think happens when they step back into the world that tried to tear them apart? Comment below, and subscribe. 6 weeks later, the world watched as Charles Robinson did something no one thought possible. He apologized. The press conference was held in the main atrium of Robinson Enterprises, the same building where everything had begun, where a janitor and a billionaire's daughter had collided in a moment that would change both their lives. Cameras lined the walls. Reporters filled every seat. The entire event was broadcast live across every major network. Charles Robinson stood at the podium, looking older somehow. Smaller. The weight of his empire no longer worn like armor, but carried like a burden he was finally ready to set down. "Thank you all for coming," he began, voice steady but quieter than usual. "I stand before you today not as a CEO, but as a father who has failed." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "For years, I built an empire on the belief that power and profit were the ultimate measures of success. I convinced myself that control equaled strength, that vulnerability was weakness." He paused, jaw tight. "I was wrong." Behind him on the screen appeared a photo, Victoria Robinson, smiling, holding a young Jody in her arms. "My late wife tried to teach me that success without humanity is just emptiness wearing an expensive suit. I didn't listen. And because of that, I nearly lost the only thing that truly mattered, my daughter." Charles's voice cracked slightly. 6 weeks ago, a man who works in this building, a janitor I had never bothered to learn the name of, did something I couldn't do. He saw my daughter not as a liability, not as a problem to be managed, but as a person who needed kindness. He looked directly into the camera. Edward Haynes didn't have wealth. He didn't have power. He didn't have anything the world told him mattered. But he had something I'd lost: compassion. And when my daughter needed it most, he gave it freely. The room was silent. I suspended him, humiliated him, tried to erase him because he threatened my control. But the truth is, he exposed something I spent years denying, that the man you mocked for mopping our floors did what none of us could. He gave my daughter peace. Charles stepped back from the podium, then added quietly, "Edward Haynes is being reinstated with full honors and back pay. Additionally, I am personally funding a new initiative, the Haven Project, a foundation dedicated to supporting working parents and children facing serious illness. It will be led by my daughter, Jody Robinson, and Mr. Haynes." Cameras flashed wildly. "I can't undo the damage I've caused. But I can do better. Starting today." As Charles stepped away from the podium, Jody emerged from the side entrance. Father and daughter locked eyes. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Charles did something he hadn't done in years. He opened his arms. Jody hesitated, just for a heartbeat, then walked into her father's embrace. The cameras captured it all, the reconciliation the world didn't know they needed to see. "I'm sorry," Charles whispered, voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. "I know, Dad," Jody whispered back. "I know." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. 3 months later, the Haven Project opened its doors. The building was modest compared to Robinson Enterprises, a renovated community center in Brooklyn, filled with light and warmth instead of steel and glass. Inside, the walls were painted in soft colors. Children's artwork hung in frames. There was a medical clinic, a child care center, support groups for single parents, and a scholarship fund for families drowning in medical debt. At the entrance, a bronze plaque read, "The Haven Project, named in honor of Jennifer Haven Haynes, where love meets need, miracles happen." On opening day, Jody stood at the podium in jeans and a simple blouse, no designer armor, no carefully crafted mask. Just herself. "My mother once told me that the world would try to tell me who to be," she began, voice steady. "For years, I let it. I became what people expected, what my father demanded, what the media decided. And I lost myself." She glanced at Edward, standing off to the side with Jennifer in his arms. "But someone reminded me that being broken doesn't mean being worthless. That kindness isn't weakness. That the smallest gestures can save lives." Jody smiled, tears glistening. "This foundation exists because a janitor with nothing to give gave me everything. And now, we're going to do the same for others." The crowd erupted in applause. That evening, after the speeches and the cameras and the celebrations, 3 people found themselves back where it all began. The break room on the 52nd floor of Robinson Enterprises. The same table. The same fluorescent lights. The same quiet hum of the building settling into night. But everything was different now. Jennifer sat cross-legged on the table, coloring in a new notebook, this one filled with drawings of flowers, hearts, and 3 stick figures holding hands. Jody sat beside her, sleeves rolled up, helping add details to a garden scene. "Make that one purple," Jennifer instructed. "Purple flowers are magical." "Purple it is," Jody said, grinning. Edward leaned against the counter, watching them, coffee in hand. For the first time in 4 years, the weight on his chest felt lighter. Jennifer looked up suddenly. "Daddy, are you happy?" Edward's throat tightened. "Yeah, baby. I'm happy." "Good." She went back to coloring. "'Cause you smile more now. I like it when you smile." Jody glanced at Edward, something unspoken passing between them. "Thank you." "No. Thank you." Later, after Jennifer had fallen asleep on the small couch in the corner, Edward and Jody stood by the window, looking out at the city. "Do you ever think about how strange this is?" Jody asked softly. "That a year ago, I didn't even know you existed. And now?" "Now you're stuck with us," Edward finished, smiling. "I wouldn't call it stuck." Jody's voice was warm. "I'd call it saved." Edward looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone completely different from the angry, broken woman who'd stormed into this break room months ago. She was still healing. They both were. But they were healing together. "You know what the crazy part is?" Edward said. "I spent so long thinking I had nothing left to give. That grief had hollowed me out. And then I met you." And Jennifer started smiling again. "And I realized I still had something worth giving." Jody's eyes filled with tears. "You gave me my life back, Edward." "No." Edward shook his head. "We gave each other something to live for." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights flicker like stars. Before they left, Edward glanced up at the ceiling, at the same fluorescent lights that had witnessed his lowest moments, his quiet prayers, his desperate hope. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you. Not for wealth, not for power, but for worth, for love, for second chances. Thank you for reminding me that I'm not invisible, that I matter." When he opened his eyes, Jody was watching him, understanding without words. She reached out and squeezed his hand gently. "Come on," she said softly. "Let's go home." Edward scooped up Jennifer, still fast asleep, clutching her purple crayon, and together, the 3 of them walked out of the building. Not as a janitor and a heiress. Not as broken people trying to survive. But as a family. Chosen. Unexpected. Imperfect. And absolutely, beautifully real.
Thanks so much for watching till the end. If this story moved you, you're going to love what's coming next. It's even more surprising and emotional than this one. Go ahead and click the story on your screen right now, and see you in the next story.